The title of this forum is U.S. Foreign Policy, The War Continues. Tonight we will examine America's role in the war in Iraq and Syria, Afghanistan, Gaza, Pakistan, Yemen, Somalia, and the reignited Cold War with Russia.
The world is in crisis. We all know this. That's why we're here. We're here because we care, because we see how desperate the situation is, because we want change. I'm sure you're all aware the largest climate march in history took place this past weekend. Solidarity marches all over the country, including here in Portland. People flooded the streets demanding that our selected officials, I use that term instead of elected, take drastic action immediately to stop the climate crisis and stop this impending catastrophe. The world is on the brink right now. It's possibly going to become unlivable within the next generation because of our actions, because of human actions. We know this. The technology to change all of this exists. It's there. It's out there to transform our economies from fossil fuel dependency to sustainable alternative energy. This is not rocket science. We know this. The technology exists. All it takes is the political will to take action to make that transformation. So after this amazing gathering of people in New York and all over the country, what happens the next day? The U.S. bombs Syria with the latest boogeyman threat of ISIS being the excuse. But what are they doing? They're bombing Syria. They're bombing the people of Syria. Our selected officials with the lobbying arm of the military-industrial complex pushing them forward are forging ahead. More wars, more bombing, more destruction of lives. How is this that we've made it to the 21st century? We've developed incredible technologies. We have the power to make change. And yet, the main thing our engineers are studying and showing us how to do and designing are more bombs for us to kill each other, for people to kill each other, more complex, more destructive ways to kill each other. How is it that our country is sending our young people off to kill and be killed, to grab control of these last few drops of fossil fuel, the last few drops of oil that can possibly be extracted, killing the planet, killing millions of people in the process? What does it say about our national priorities? What does it say about us, our personal priorities? When we're spending trillions of dollars on war, literally trillions. There was Harvard University study and a Brown University study that both corroborated that the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan will end up costing the U.S. economy $4 to $6 trillion. I know $1 million is a lot for us to imagine. Most of us have never seen $1 million, and I probably, most of us never will. But $1 million is a lot. $1 trillion is $1 million million. $1 million million. That's a big number. That's the money that our country is spending on killing people, on devastating infrastructure in other countries, destroying people's lives. That's insane. When I was a kid, I was pretty indignant about grown-ups, and I would tell them, you screwed this world up. Now we're going to have to fix it. And now I am an adult, and the world is in an even bigger mess than it was when I was a kid. And the only thing that I hope to be able to say to my daughter when she comes to me with that same indignation is to show her through my life's work that I am doing everything in my power to change this, to turn this around, to clean up this mess that we inherited and are making worse and worse. And I hope that all of us will take that challenge up, that when the next generation comes and say, how did you keep this screwed up world so screwed up? That we'll be able to say, no, we're doing what we can. We're trying to change this. We're coming together. We're trying to build power. We're trying to address it. And the question is, what kind of a world do we want? And I think we all want to transform what's there. how do we do it? We have to do it together. Think about yourself, your own personal talents, how you can use those to address this challenge. And I hope that all of us can take the words of the late peace activist Rachel Corrie to heart. She went to Gaza at age 23, horrified by the genocide that she saw there. She was unprepared for what she saw going on from her life in Olympia, Washington, growing up. Had no idea what was going on in Gaza. So she went there, and she ended up giving her life to the cause of Palestinian liberation. She stood in front of a U.S.-made armored bulldozer in order to protect a Palestinian home, and was bulldozed to death by an Israeli soldier. In one of her last emails home to her parents, Rachel said, "I think it is a good idea for all of us to drop everything and devote our lives to making this stop."
I can at least describe what my experience over the past 13 months, and I think that experience and what I saw in the development process has a direct correlation. I spent 13 months with USAID in Afghanistan as the water technical lead for the mission. As you know, the amount of funding for development that has gone to Afghanistan since 2001 is now the largest funding for development in the history of the U.S. Basically, it's bigger than the Marshall Fund, for the Reconstruction of Germany. But you also have seen probably from a lot of media reports and some of the reports coming directly from the government, SIGAR, that's the Special Inspector General for the Reconstruction of Afghanistan, that there's not a lot to really show for in terms of reconstruction in Afghanistan. And that probably has to do with a lot of the corruption which has been really now institutionalized and really made a part of that society, and that is because of the uncontrolled amount of money that was interjected into a society and into an economy that just cannot absorb it and cannot spend it properly. And so it just has created very ripe conditions for corruption. And the corruption just it's fairly widespread, from petty Afghan bureaucrats to U.S.-based contractors, and I would say most of it is probably, non-government, non-Afghan government players that really is benefiting from that money. And also that the amount of money that has gone to Afghanistan, from various countries and donors also has created a society that's now the economic stratification is just, incredible. You have 2% of the population, or less actually, probably controlling 95% of the wealth in that country. And you have, in a country like Afghanistan, which is a third world country, people who are now worth, quote unquote, $1 billion or more. And that is, it's really hard to fathom. But most of the people are poor, and really they're just trying to make a living, and they've been pretty much deprived over the past, 35 years, since the Soviets invaded first in 1979 to this day, and in a state of perpetual war, which just does not allow for very good development, for not very good thinking, and just not for a very good life at all. So people don't really have a lot to live for, the majority of the people, and that pushes them into resistance and really kind of, picking up arms and violence, really. And so that is what is happening there. It is, Afghanistan is in a difficult neighborhood. I think, you talked about, some of the climatic, issues that are there, and environmental catastrophes, and really kind of, more the extraction and use and availability of resources to people. All of those have a lot to do with how people really live with one another, and then also how they approach life in general. In a state of war, really, the environment is a big loser, and right now I think, that is something for the world to really be aware of. And it is a serious matter because it is crossing boundaries, and it has it'll have legacies, that'll pretty much last, for decades to come. The wars of the future will be, again, over resources, but probably not oil for a long time, because that is obviously, there's an end to oil at some point. But the next war will be over water and really kind of availability of land and kind of, how land is used and how land is developed. It's pretty common in Africa. The same thing is happening, with mines and really extractive resources. And Afghanistan is rich in that sense because it is sitting on at least $2 trillion worth of resources, lithium, copper, iron, and those are all the resources of the future, and water. Peace in Afghanistan will come, I think, if people are really provided with decent livelihoods and really a place where they can live in peace, and also for them to have a secure future. And I think that future is possible for that country because it is fortunate. For one, it has a small population, and for two, it has the resources and the land base to really support and sustain that population. But again, being in a difficult neighborhood, my area was water, and for that country, all of the rivers in the country is flowing out of Afghanistan. So the neighbors really are not interested in development of water resources, which is then, pretty much, the next, that's the key thing, for food security and what have you. And unless, those guarantees are made, I think, peace will be hard to come in that country. And so there are some positives there, I think, from what I see, because ultimately, if you get away from the politics, really kind of, if you want to be practical about, resources and really food security, and then I would say livelihood security, everybody who is living in the neighborhood will need that. And if it's not provided collectively, I think, it'll be very difficult to really make that available for some and not for all.
I guess, firstly, I think it's extremely important for us to acknowledge that in this place that we call the United States of America, here in what we call Portland, Oregon, that we are standing on indigenous land and conquered land in a colonial project called the United States of America. And then that sets the stage for the wars and the other things that we're involved with now and the politics of now, that flag, that's what that represents, and that's who we are. And that's a part of our history that we have to acknowledge and face and work with. And we have to work with those people that we have wronged and listen to them in how we can make this world a better, livable place where we are connected with one another and the earth. There's so many things that I'd like to say to you and that I've said to so many people for the last 7 years since I got out of the military. But today, I guess mostly it's about action, and that I would like to see people doing more action, and I hear that from many other people. And just like Rachel Corey said before, we paid for her to get bulldozed to death. We paid for her to get bulldozed to death. It's the same thing, from the beginning of the colonial project here. I feel like we need to be acting and stepping up and being leaders in that, and be willing to sacrifice something, dropping everything, like she said. Maybe it can't be everything. I know it can't be everything for me, and I don't want it to be, but a lot of us veterans, we feel like we've already stepped up, and we still feel that way. I guess to where we are, in Iraq and Syria, new sound just like the old sound. What else is there to say? I could go into depth about, us destabilizing Libya, and that a lot of those people that we were assisting with Saudi and, the help of Gulf states that we fund and support, with weapons and training, to suppress their own people, but also to fight the war in Libya, to get rid of Gaddafi, that we helped fund, the movement of those arms through Turkey to fund the war that's going on now in Syria, and that just like in Afghanistan, just like in Iraq, that we were funding people against some of our enemies, and now they're fighting us with our training and our money and our weapons. New sound, just like the old sound, you know. When are we going to do that? I've never been arrested. I really avoided it. It's really fearful for me because my job, when I was wearing these pants, they weren't shorts then. When I was wearing these exact pants, I was kidnapping people and sending them to prisons where people were trained by people like Colonel Steele, who helped organize some of the death squads and the Contras in Central America. They sent him to Iraq, too. And that's where they trained the Iraqi military that is predominantly Shia, and that's what they've been doing for a while, and why the Sunni people in Iraq have been standing up and saying, hell yeah, ISIS is better than the Iraqi military and the Iraqi government, because they were just killing people, going around since we were there and since we left, and murdering people. So, you know, that's what I used to do in these pants that we all paid for. And somebody went to jail for that, you know, someone in their early 20s. You know, who didn't want to go to jail, but they were willing to, you know, sit in a tripod uncomfortably with 40 police with weapons threatening them, you know, and then be taken to jail and have to face those things. And that's like, some would say that's a heavy sacrifice. You know, I'm afraid to get arrested because that's what I used to do. Oh yeah, back to that point. Because I used to kidnap people and send them to be tortured, or sometimes I would assist in torturing people, you know, under stairs in a school building where kids should have been in school. We would take men and we'd handcuff them behind their back and make them squat on a bench and not let them sleep. Or sometimes somebody would come in and interrogate them. That's what I did when I was 21. I wasn't driving a Mustang. And we all paid for it. And I was taught from when I was young, even in my liberal family, that always, you know, voted for Clinton, voted for Obama, you know, Jimmy Carter's the man, JFK, woo. You know, those people aren't our saviors. Yeah, we've got health care. You know, when Obamacare came through, I didn't have my disability from the VA, so I didn't have full health care. I'm glad I got that, but it doesn't change the fact that he's still murdering people, you know, here and abroad. That if people hadn't stood up in Ferguson and said enough is enough and brought the idea that like maybe we shouldn't be giving all these military weapons and training to our police, but that's still going on. Like, when is enough for you? Like, it might not be affecting some of us every day. Like, maybe it just hurts inside. But I know there's some people in this room that's a lot more than that.
So the State of Israel maintains two separate regimes. One is a parliamentary democracy, and the second is a military dictatorship. In the 1967 borders that uses military rules, a military court, and a prison system, the generals are served as high commanders of different regions. Palestinians today inside the 1948 mandatory Palestine are divided into four groups. Palestinians inside the Green Line that carry Israeli IDs and citizenship. Palestinians in the West Bank that have the PA for civilian matters but are under military law enforced by the IDF. We have Palestinians in East Jerusalem that have a status of permanent residency, which theoretically gives them all rights as citizens except for the right to vote in the general election. And we have Palestinians in Gaza that are living under full and complete occupation. So when you hear Israeli representatives saying that we have pulled our forces out of Gaza, that is nothing but a very cheap semantic trick, because Israel controls the water, it controls the air, it controls the borders, it controls what goes in and what comes out. And so according to international law, Israel is 100% occupied, no matter how many Israeli representatives say that we have pulled our forces out of Gaza. That means nothing in international law. The State of Israel has been very consistent since 1948, and really even from before that, as the Zionist movement on their agenda and what they want. The Zionist movement wants and have wanted since the get-go the land of Israel. They want the land without the people. Since the Nakba and to this day, The State of Israel has been working tirelessly on putting facts on the ground to promote that agenda. Facts on the grounds were created in 1948 and 1949 when people were pushed away from their homes and from their land at gunpoint. They were created for 20 years after that when everyone who tried to return was shot dead at the border. They were made in the 80s when the State of Israel started allowing and encouraging civilians to move outside the Green Line and into what we now call settlements, again, completely against international law. And it's been created today when only a couple of weeks ago Israel announced one of the greatest, largest land grabs in East Jerusalem. Alexander Haig, the former Secretary of State during the Reagan times, has been quoted saying, "Israel is the largest American aircraft carrier in the world that cannot be sunk, does not carry even one American soldier, and is located in a critical region for American national security." On August 16, 2007, Israel and the United States have signed an agreement that will give Israel $30 billion in military aid over the next decade. In the press release, officials call that aid a long-term investment in peace, which I found amusing when I found that press release this morning. So officially, the number we should be talking about is $3 billion a year. But really, if you look closer, you will find that many other covertly and overtly ways in which the U.S. funds to Israel are even higher than that official $3 billion, as if that's not enough. According to the U.S. Foreign Aid to Israel Congressional Research Service, from 2014, Israel is the largest cumulative recipient of U.S. foreign assistance since World War II. Strong congressional support for Israel has resulted in Israel receiving benefits not available to any other country in the world. Israel can use some U.S. military assistance both for research and development in the United States and for military purchases from Israeli manufacturers. Israel is one of the only, if not the only country in the world that gets to take the U.S. funds that it gets, and instead of putting it back into U.S. economy with contracts with Boeing and other American companies like that, they get to invest it in their own economy. In addition, U.S. assistance embarked for Israel is generally delivered in the first 30 days of the fiscal year, while most other recipients normally receive aid in installments. And Israel is permitted to use cash flow financing for its U.S. arms purchases. The training, I think, is another example of how this type of connection between Israel and the U.S. is so harmful for people on both places, because we're seeing more and more American police being trained by Israeli army or police. And so after decades of perfecting the best ways to maintain and control civilian population, Israel is now exporting these methods to be used on vulnerable populations here. And it's been said that some of the police officials in Ferguson have been under Israeli training. So the connections are just clear as day, I think. The Palestinians are a captive audience for Israel's weapon development. You would sometimes hear the phrase "tried in the following villages" during Israeli weapons expos. According to the Palestinian Ministry of Health, during the recent operation, Israel started using a special type of ammunition that is designed to cause less fatalities, but ultimately causes more damage to individuals in a smaller radius. One Israeli critic of the current government used the IDF spokesperson's own publications to try and calculate the amount of explosives used during Protective Edge, the latest catastrophe that happened in Gaza very recently. His calculation reached 13 kilotons, which is almost the equal amount of power of the atom bomb that was dropped on Hiroshima. Gaza is 1/3 the size of Hiroshima. And so, when people come to talk to us about Israel's right to defend itself, I think we have to be very clear in explaining that the disproportion of the situation is one where Israel is not defending itself. It is instead ethnically cleansing and killing people, killing innocent civilians, and it's doing so with all of our tax money. In 2005, a call came out of Palestinian civil society calling on BDS. BDS stands for Boycott, Divestment, and Sanction. It's a movement that was going on during South Africa apartheid and contributed to ending that apartheid. BDS just says that, at least in my view, BDS says that even if our governments and things that we can't control are investing in this, the smallest thing that we can do is control our money and our resources. And so instead of buying products that are manufactured in illegal, stolen land, using Palestinian workers that are not receiving even the Israeli minimum wage or minimum working conditions. Instead of supporting these products, buy local, buy something else, buy anything else. But don't, as a first step, try to make sure that you don't give your money to support people that profit off human rights violations.